The soft hum of machines filled the hospital room, a steady rhythm in an otherwise silent space. Morning light filtered gently through the half-drawn blinds, casting warm streaks across the bed where Mr. Harold lay, motionless but awake. His eyes, pale and weathered by time, stared at the ceiling as if searching for something beyond it. Once the school's quiet janitor, Harold had spent decades mopping floors, fixing leaky faucets, and gently nodding at students who never really saw him. He never married, no kids, no family listed on his chart, just a man who had spent his life in the background. Except now, one person noticed. Each day at exactly 4 p.m., Emily would arrive. Just 17, she was part of the school's volunteer program, assigned to visit patients with no family. But to Emily, this wasn't a chore. She'd bring a book or sometimes just sit in silence, her presence soft and constant like the ticking clock on the wall. Today, her voice floated through the quiet room as she read from To Kill a Mockingbird. She paused every few paragraphs, glancing over to see if Harold's expression changed. It rarely did, but sometimes, if she read something funny or brave, she thought she saw the corner of his mouth twitch. She didn't know much about him, only what the nurses had told her. That he'd never had a visitor. That he rarely spoke. That he was just a janitor. But to Emily, he had become something more. She didn't need words from him. In their shared silences, something unspoken passed between them, kindness, respect, a strange, tender understanding. Two very different lives, meeting in the quiet, proving that sometimes, connection doesn't need sound to be heard. The school hallway buzzed with the usual morning chaos, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking, laughter bouncing off the walls. Emily walked slowly, her fingers trailing along the cold metal lockers, her mind elsewhere. She passed the old janitor's closet. It was small and tucked into a corner, unnoticed by most. But Emily paused there, her eyes settling on the faded name tag still taped to the door, Mr. Harold. She remembered the day her locker jammed during her freshman year. Frustrated and late for class, she kicked it in defeat. Then, quietly, from behind her, Harold appeared, stooped, silent, eyes kind behind thick glasses. He didn't say much, just offered a small smile and twisted a wrench. The door popped open. The next morning, a sticky note had been left inside her locker. Don't let stuck doors ruin your day. You're stronger than you think. H. It wasn't just her. Friends had told stories, notes appearing after hard days, kind gestures from a man who was barely noticed in the crowd. When someone dropped books, Harold was always there first. When a kid sat alone at lunch, he quietly slid them an extra juice box from the staff fridge. No one really talked to him. No one ever asked his story. And yet, he had always seen everyone else. Back then, Emily hadn't thought much about it. But now, walking those same halls, she felt the weight of those little things. He hadn't needed a spotlight or recognition. He simply gave what he had: time, kindness, quiet care. And somehow, in doing so, he'd left a deeper mark than anyone realized. Emily touched the name tag once more and whispered, "I see you now." The next afternoon, Emily hurried down the hospital corridor, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights overhead. She clutched a worn copy of The Little Prince, a book she'd promised to start reading to Mr. Harold that day. But when she reached his room, something was different. The bed was neatly made. The machines were gone. The soft beeping she'd grown used to had fallen silent. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, heart pounding. A nurse appeared beside her, gently touching her arm. "He passed early this morning," she said softly, peacefully. In his sleep. Emily blinked, as if the words didn't quite register. She walked slowly into the empty room, her footsteps muffled by the linoleum floor. The chair where she'd sat each day was still slightly angled toward the bed. She placed the book on the windowsill and sank into the seat, staring at the absence before her. The nurse returned a moment later, handing her a small envelope. "He asked us to give you this," she said. Emily stared at her name written in shaky pen on the front. Her fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a single note, written on lined paper. "You gave me more than time. You gave me warmth. You made me feel seen in a world that had forgotten I was still here. Keep being that light, for others, and for yourself. H." Tears slipped down Emily's cheeks, quiet at first, then freely falling. She clutched the note to her chest, her breath catching in grief and something else, something deeper. Gratitude. He hadn't spoken many words in life, but these few, echoed louder than most ever would. In his silent goodbye, Harold had given Emily something lasting, the reminder that even quiet lives can make the loudest impact. A week later, the school auditorium buzzed with restless students. It was the monthly assembly, usually a time for announcements, sports highlights, and half-hearted applause. But today felt different. Emily stood backstage, gripping a small notecard and the folded letter from Mr. Harold in her pocket. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had never spoken in front of the whole school. But this wasn't about nerves. This was about him. The principal introduced her. Emily volunteered to speak today about someone who quietly made a difference here, someone many of us overlooked. As she stepped onto the stage, the crowd quieted. Some students tilted their heads, confused. Emily took a breath and began. You may not have known Mr. Harold. Most of us didn't. He was the school janitor. The man who fixed lockers, swept floors, and unlocked classrooms when we forgot our keys. She paused, scanning the room. But what most of us missed was that Mr. Harold was more than that. He saw us. He cared, in ways no one asked him to. Kind notes, a gentle hand when someone dropped their books, a juice box left on a hard day. She held up the note he had written her. I was with him during his final weeks. And even then, he didn't ask for anything. He just gave, quietly, constantly. He reminded me, and I hope all of us, that being seen, being kind, being present, that's what really matters. Emily smiled through tears. So today, I'm starting something in his name, the Harold Award. Every year, it'll go to a student who shows compassion, not for applause, but because it's right. The crowd was silent, moved. For the first time, Mr. Harold's name echoed in a room full of students, loud, clear, and remembered. A few weeks later, the school felt a little different. Not louder, not flashier, just warmer. Outside the janitor's closet, once overlooked, passed by without a second glance, a new plaque had been installed. Nothing grand, nothing flashy. Just a small brass rectangle, polished and shining softly under the hallway light. It read, in memory of Mr. Harold. He never asked to be seen, he simply chose to see others. Proof that kindness echoes louder than words. Students passed by on their way to class, and for the first time, they stopped. A few stared quietly, some smiled, others pointed out the name to friends who didn't recognize it, until they remembered. Oh, the janitor, he fixed my desk once. He left me a sticky note once when I was having a rough day. He always nodded at me in the hallway. The whispers grew, not in volume, but in meaning. Mr. Harold was no longer invisible. In the lunchroom, a student who usually sat alone found someone sliding into the seat across from them, Emily, holding 2 juice boxes. You okay? She asked with a smile. It had begun, not because someone told them to be kind, but because they saw that it mattered. Because they realized kindness isn't about grand gestures. It's about being present, being real, being human. Years would pass, faces would change, but that little plaque remained. Quiet, solid, eternal. And every time a student stopped to read it, every time they carried a book to someone lonely, or fixed something broken without being asked, or left a kind note behind, Mr. Harold lived on. His goodbye was silent, but his impact, it would echo through generations.